Time Stands Still is by an author who is a Pulitzer Prize-winning author, and he writes absolutely brilliantly, and I'm a sucker for a really well-written story. In addition to that, he puts a woman who is pursuing a career in one of the two central points. Obviously, the other is a man. And it's how they attack the problem, not only of their life, and their life together, but what they do in life that they feel makes a difference, and how that relates to our current society. And it just was, to me, very impactful, because there is no right or wrong answer. And Margulies deals brilliantly with the question of not having to be right. And that was a particular appeal. There are other much larger and loftier reasons, but that was my personal reason. The challenges of the production were immense. The casting was everything. In some plays, you can go, oh, this person was my first choice, but I didn't get them, and so I have somebody else, and it's okay. In Time Stands Still, it's not okay. There are only 4 characters in the piece, but each character is so specific and so important to the piece that they had to be absolutely right. And I will tell you right now, I got all my first choices. So I'm very, very happy with that. I think the design is very interesting for the designers. And I'll let them tell their own stories. But these are designers I have worked with in other productions, very, very different. And they're all working in a way that is different than I've ever seen before. Let me just put it that way and let them tell their own stories. It's difficult to say what would enrich the production. I know what would enrich the production. See it twice. If you are a BRT subscriber, you know you have the encore possibility. You can come back and see the show again for nothing. I would plan to do that even before you see it, because there are so many things Margulies deals with in the script that, of any script I have dealt with in a long time, I find it interesting that I am still discovering things about it. After having lived with it for 1.5 years, rehearsed it for 3 weeks, I'm still finding out things. So it's not a difficult play at all. It's kind of funny in a lot of places. It's somewhat tragic. It is thoughtful. I think if you allow yourself to go on the ride of the play, don't expect it to be anything, and just go with the ride of the play. You will have a wonderful experience. These are magnificent actors, an amazing amount of work they have done extremely well. I challenge you to see better ensemble work anywhere.
The simple way to say it is that Michael and I are married in real life and playing opposite each other in this show, which is very exciting. So yeah, we get to be on stage together this time instead of just visiting, which is really nice.
Hold on.
We can wait.
That little present that you were hiding during witness for the
Behind
prosecution
my purses, yes.
with
Yeah,
excellent
your
purse
purses.
acting
Yeah.
is now a little 4-month-old at home right now.
And she's here with us, which is really special.
Can you talk about how the characters are like us?
Oh yeah, actually the characters in Time Stand Still parallel our actual relationship.
It really freaks me out, honestly.
Because we're friends from Lost in Yonkers and Rumors, and then we've remained friends. Like we get together in New York, we're active life friends,
Absolutely.
and I've become friends with Michael through Eleanor. And then we're friends from Little Shop of Horrors, and in the play, they're a married couple. I'm their friend, and I'm introducing them to my
and
new
I had never
girlfriend.
met them. This is so weird.
Yes, so our show relationship is paralleling our life relationship, which is really cool.
wild.
So we don't have to do any work.
So yeah, basically.
Done.
Well, it really did. I mean, it started us at a different point. We kind of
It's
started. We got an extra week's rehearsal in a way because our relationships were already set.
Yeah, I think that's
That's a good
really
point.
true. And when you don't have to manufacture chemistry or pray that it will appear magically one day, and when you have a certain level of trust with the people that you're working with, or mistrust as the case may be, no, I'm kidding, but like that just perfectly parallels what you have to do. You can jump in and get your feet wet a lot more quickly.
So what do you find most challenging then about this play?
Oh,
One thing maybe?
Donald Margulies writes in a very specific way. And if you ever take a writing class, one of the first things they'll say is, go out and listen to the way people talk. And that's one thing. But then to try to write like that's a very difficult thing, and to write well like that. And he writes the way people speak, with the rhythms that people speak in, overlapping each other, and
Interjecting.
and emphasizing
Just like that.
things in a very specific way. And he's very prescriptive as to how it should be done. There are slashes exactly where people should be overlapping. There are asterisks when people should be speaking at the same time. There are italics in the middle of words where he feels the emphasis should be. So nailing that, and we're still working on it, is very difficult.
yeah.
But hopefully the effect is that people have just kind of walked into a room and seen people talking.
It is so natural. Like, I feel like that's the joy of it.
Natural,
It should
yeah.
be natural, but there's like a lot of work to make it
Yeah.
seem
It's
natural.
one of those funny things where it's very technical, but once you have it, it feels really natural.
Yeah, you know you nailed it.
So yeah, because you know when it's right. It actually just kind of fits into place. But there's a technical aspect which seems very robotic, and then suddenly it goes, oh no, that was easy.
Yeah, it's
like
like a
music.
song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other, you brought up writing class. I think the other thing for me is that in writing classes, they'll say get in late and out early when it comes to scenes. So in terms of the story, rather than a lot of wind up, it's sort of he throws you into the middle of a scene or a conversation, and then all this stuff happens, and then the scene's over. So I think as a performer, you have to just sort of be ready to take that ride, and it's not an easy ride all the time. It's taking, it's exhausting, particularly as we're building it, but hopefully, again, the effect for the audience will be that it really kind of smacks you in the face in the best possible way.
So one of the challenges I faced on this production was the fact that I had to come up with the basic sound design and most of the sounds and all of the music before I even saw a rehearsal. So I worked with Susan and I, read the script. But I collected all the musical pieces and did the compositions before I actually came here to Bristol, and then I pieced it all together to come up with the design. So I went back and forth on whether or not to use original music for this production or to use found music and piece things together that way. And when I first talked to Susan, she had no doubt that she wanted original music. And so I was very excited about that because I always prefer to use original music. It makes me feel like I'm more a part of the play itself, and we can tailor the music exactly to what we want to achieve versus trying to, apply found music to a certain scene. So I was very thrilled. I also find doing original music a challenge for myself professionally And I love to work with other people, as I'm not a musician. I studied composition in grad school, but I'm not a musician. So I worked with Justin Ritchie, who's an amazing musician, arranger, and composer that I've heard perform several times in Brooklyn. And I was really wanting to do a project with him, so I asked him if he'd be willing to do this, and I was very thrilled when he said he would. So on this project, what we did was come up with lots of chunks of sound, little pieces of musical compositions that I could take and move around and repeat and use in different ways. With the musical sounds that I collected and we composed, I would take those and work with them once I saw the rehearsals and place them in the right place, extend them, add to them, take away from them, repeat them, modify them, whatever I needed to do to make them fit exactly how they needed to with the play. Once I read the play, I wanted some kind of music that said Williamsburg, New York, and Justin happens to live in the next area over from Williamsburg. He lives in Bed-Stuy, and I'd seen him perform in that area as well, and I just thought of him first, and I just said, go to town, help me with some ideas that speak about the neighborhood, and he's really great with this jazz-type music that he does with all the loops and repetitions. And that's what he presented, and that's what we worked with together, and that's where we ended up. Some of the things that you should listen for when you come to the play would be things like the opening cue. We start the play, one of the sounds that I choose in there is actually the same sound that I end the play with, and what I've done to that is I've reversed it and played it backwards in time. So you kind of start the play with that and you end the play, so it's almost like a bookend kind of thing. So you could listen for that if you want to. You could take a listen to how we've pieced the music together, and there's some things that are repeated, some things that are modified from scene to scene, some things that move. They move in space, they move in time, so that would be some of the things. Another thing you could listen for is how I have been very minimal with the actual sound effects I've used. I want to express an idea, but I want to leave some of it up to your creativity as well. I want you to think about sounds and you imagine the sounds. I'm not going to play every little thing that happens in the background because I think that goes along with the design for the rest of the show. The set's amazing, the costumes, the lighting, the props, everything working together. But it's minimal, and the apartment, it is a Williamsburg apartment, but it doesn't have everything you would expect in an apartment. For instance, there's no clutter around, and I've tried not to do that with the sound as well.
When Susan and I first started talking about Time Stands Still, the thing that we both felt was really important that our production not feel like television or a movie, because the text itself is already in this sort of realistic cinematic world. Whatever we could do to heighten our reality and bring in some magic was much wanted. A lot of my influences for the set came from my personal experiences. I live in Brooklyn, New York, and this play takes place in a neighborhood in Brooklyn in which I used to live. And it's Williamsburg, which is an area where you have all of these sort of industrial lofts that have been converted into people's condos or apartments. It's all very fancy to live in an old factory. So that was the primary influence for the set. Invariably, furniture placement changes. It's a given. I could put furniture where I want it on a ground plan, but it's always going to change in the rehearsal room, and that's just part of it. There's always an evolution to a design, but that's probably the biggest one that comes about. Well, a model is really important because it's a representation of three-dimensional space in 3 dimensions. A lot of designers will not do a model and will only do sort of a rendering. And I prefer very much to always work in 3 dimensions, so I feel like I'm not lying about what space is actually doing. I feel like rather than looking, I want them to feel something. I want them to come in and feel like they understand what they're looking at, that it evokes something familiar, even if they themselves have never been in an old factory apartment situation. If they see it, I want them to say, "Oh, I know it. I understand this. I know what this is." So yeah, it's really about sort of giving the audience something that they can both attach to emotionally and psychologically, but also giving them something that is a pleasure to look at.
So throughout the process of the show, some of the emotional connections that we're trying to pass on to the audience is trying to capture the realness of these people's lives. So the lighting there's a rawness there. We're trying not to use a lot of color. We're trying to create a realistic look throughout the show. The color that we use is oftentimes just during the transitions, as we show time of day passing or trying to set up the next scene and emphasize some of the scenic elements. Some of the challenges that we had during this production were from the scenic elements. We had these beautiful beams that jut out into the space, but that creates some challenges when you're trying to light through those. So during the focus, we had to adjust and shift lights here and there, trying to get the best shot. Well, the large beam right by the kitchen counter, we just tried to keep as much light off of it as possible because it would pop out too much. So it was challenging, but luckily we were able to set up enough areas on the stage where we could, shoot downstage of it and upstage of it and to each side of it. I think the audience should try to see the emotional connection that the actors are going through the lighting. I think the lights take you on their journey. We start out a little warmer, and even the playwright has set it up that way, where we start in the afternoon where it's a little bit warmer, and then we get more into the evening, and then as the play progresses, we're able to make the looks even more intense. I think some of the fun lighting elements are lighting through those windows. We have a backdrop back there, but because of the frosting of the glass, you don't see it as much. So I was able to put some gobos, which are these textural elements that you put inside the lights to create texture on the back of the lighting texture on the back of the windows. I think the texture that we're able to put on the windows creates a visual interest that is kind of nice.
Tuesday on Cook This.
It's a really easy dinner any night of the week. Stick around, you don't want to miss my pecan-encrusted pork tenderloin with a rosemary brown butter.
New episodes of Cook This every Tuesday at couriertimes.com. Friday on Cheers to You.
Someone brought out a bottle of Manatawny Keystone whiskey. Immediately I was wondering, where's this from? Somebody said Pottstown.
New episodes of Cheers to You every Friday at couriertimes.com. This week on Eat This,
the Porcini Dusted Scallops, U10 diver scallops, serve them on a nice bed of polenta, fresh ratatouille, and some smoked mussels. It's a beautiful dish.
Eat This at couriertimes.com is brought to you by Penn Community Bank. This week on Navigating Life,
every piece that we produce here definitely gets hand done. Whether it's started on a computerized tool or not, it still gets hand done.
Navigating Life at CourierTimes.com is brought to you by Pickering Manor.